This is the panel presented by Sport Chek, and guys, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling no separation anxiety to my parka right now.
No, this is nice to be in Raleigh, but for the Edmonton Oilers, it's a pivotal weekend, Jess. I mean, there's no two ways about it. At this point, the Oilers have to look at this weekend as at least extracting 3 out of 4 to give them some positive momentum heading home. This is the vital point in the season. And yes, no one seems to want that 8th spot in the Western Conference, but if the Oilers want it, they got to start stringing some points together. They probably should have had points in the game against Pittsburgh, but they come away with nothing. And that's really been something that's been a bit of a trend since the All-Star break. There could have been 4 points coming out of Montreal and Philadelphia. There were only 2, and I think another 1 or 2 were left on the table last night in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you know, you take a look at that game against Pittsburgh, and Ken Hitchcock referred to it as an A game from the Oilers. They're a real good 5-on-5. Multiple errors lead to goals, right? And that shorthanded goal, I mean, Jack and me have talked about it over the years. Those are usually worth 2 against when you give those up. Like, it can psychologically hurt you. You lose confidence in the power play. The Oilers were, they were just so passive on that power play. Didn't put pucks to the net when they had the opportunity. And then the puck ends up on, in their goal. And Mikko Koskinen admitted he'd like to have that one back. That said, the balance of overall play was pretty good. And the support guys in the 3rd and 4th lines tilted the ice when they were out there. That game was there to be had. They did some good things, and they have to build on some of those good things against 2 good opponents this weekend.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about their defense from last night. Like you said, Ken Hitchcock said that they brought their A game, or in other words, their road game. Ken also mentioned that we could see the same defenseman out on the ice tomorrow night against the Hurricanes.
Well, I think that's because, Matt Benning wasn't feeling right after the game in Minnesota, which was the Oilers' last victory. And, he had a practice today. I think he's certainly, a possible option for Ken Hitchcock to utilize. But as Bob mentioned, there were a lot of good moments 5-on-5 against Pittsburgh. And I think the defense, for the most part, limited Pittsburgh's 2nd and 3rd chances. There were a couple of snap plays, one of which, came when the team was on the power play that cost them the game. It was essentially a 4-minute stretch and some brilliant goaltending from Matt Murray. So I think Ken Hitchcock is probably inclined to utilize the same personnel, although we could see Kyle Brodziak come back to play his 900th NHL game. As Bob mentioned, the one caveat there is I thought Colby Cave and Brad Malone had some real good moments where they were in the paint with some good chances. There was a shift with about 3.5 minutes to go, Jessica, where the Oilers had an offensive zone draw down a goal, and Ken Hitchcock took a gamble, sent out his 4th line with Cave in the middle, Reeder and Ratty, and they controlled the flow of play in Pittsburgh's zone for the next minute. So I think that was a confidence-building shift and an option for Ken Hitchcock to keep that lineup against the Penguins intact.
And, for the Oilers, I mean, Jack talks about the defense. They got 8 guys here right now. They got Andrej Sekera getting his game back up. He's gotten the extension courtesy of the NHL for 2 more games. He's agreed to do that. And when that happens, Edmonton's going to have to make 1, if not 2 moves. And it might happen before then. But they could have, they'd have in theory as many as 9 defensemen. So guys are fighting for spots. There's a little bit of competition. And then how about Bakersfield? It's a great story.
Yeah,
that said,
that
said, I'd still say the Oilers, compared to other NHL organizations, they've got some intriguing prospects, but I'd say they're middle of the road in terms of where they're at prospect depth-wise. By this time next year, they could be in a good spot there. But that doesn't help cool off the heat that's on this team. Again, big weekend.
And Jess, just to follow up on Bob's point, the thing that's going on in Bakersfield right now, I had a chance to talk to Brad Malone about this, is they are truly the sum of collective parts. And that speaks to Bob's point as far as they don't have any necessarily glittering prospects that jump out and hit you right in the face, but the way they're playing as a team is, 13 wins in a row. And there is something to be said, and Jay Woodcroft has talked about this, the skill of winning and developing a certain culture at the American Hockey League level that will then translate when these players come up and play at the NHL level. And Bob mentioned Andrej Sekera. I think also some players down there are gleaning from his veteran presence. I think his presence down there is also giving players in Bakersfield a glimmer of what's to come at the next level.
And let's just talk about what's to come tomorrow night when we do face off against the Carolina Hurricanes.
Well, Carolina is, they've finally started to gain some traction. A lot of people thought they'd be better at the start of the year. They didn't get stops. Curtis McElhinney's been okay for them. but they're scoring goals. And we talked about it when Carolina roared into town, Jack. They made that trade, Victor Rask, and I'm not sure what Victor Rask's dimension is, but Niederreiter is a proven 20 goal scorer in this league, and he has made an impact since coming over in that trade. And they've done it all without, Jordan Staal is a pretty good player down the middle. So this is a team that's they got a chance to make the playoffs, especially if they get some stops. Difficult challenge. The Islanders, a different team. Their third and fourth lines have been really productive, and they've bought into Barry Trotz, who's obviously up for Coach of the Year.
The key to that resuscitation of the Islanders' fourth line in particular is the return of Matt Martin. I mean, Martin, Cizikas, and Clutterbuck for years now in the NHL have been arguably the best fourth line in the league, certainly the most physical with a bit of scoring touch. Robin Leonard has given them fantastic goaltending this year. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming out of the New York Islanders. They've gotten stops. They've gotten balanced scoring with the departure of John Tavares, of course, to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But back to the here and now and the Friday night game against the Carolina Hurricanes from Raleigh. Look, they're on the front end of a back-to-back, so it's possible. And McElhinney actually .917 save percentage, but I think the Oilers might get Peter Mrazek, who made it interesting a couple of weeks ago when Carolina jumped out to a 6-1 lead and then had to kind of hang on a little bit. But I think it might be Mrazek who might get the start simply because the Canes are on the front end of a back-to-back. But as Bob mentioned, they're 7-2-1, and that directly correlates with a trade that brought Niederreiter to Raleigh. He's a guy to watch Friday night when the Canes play the Oilers. He scored 6 goals since joining Carolina. And if you know anything about the Canes, what's kept them from making the playoffs the last couple of years is they haven't had enough goals. They're starting to get them now.
Another big game tomorrow night. They all count at this point. Bob, Jack, thanks so much, and happy Valentine's Day.
Absolutely, Jess.